We know the saying well. Give a person a fish, and you feed them for a day. You teach them to fish, and you give them an occupation that will feed them for a lifetime. I'm particularly passionate about this subject and even wrote a book about discovering the true joy in work. When we claim to be teaching someone to fish, we might be ignoring the reason why they need to learn to fish in the first place. We might be missing the underlying issue. Not only do they lack access to fish, but they may also not have access to fishing equipment, ponds, bait, education, and places to cook whatever is caught. Charity and giving can be where we start. In the words of Jesus, suppose a brother or a sister without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? James 2:15-16. But long term, we need to look towards more than giving as a solution. Creating a job provides skills, training, and dignity. It can prevent us from becoming preoccupied with other vices. We need to be looking to create jobs and places where there is a tragic past that has left people with scars of distrust and defensiveness. These wounds are deep, and they take a long time to heal. We have an opportunity to promote flourishing where there has been a desert and drought. Let's watch this story of an unlikely connection between indigenous people in Montana and an organic farmer in Texas. What was initially met with skepticism has bloomed into a relationship that travels far and wide.
When we look at our culture, when we look at where we've come from, and we look at sustaining who it is that we are as people, we look at it from a standpoint of thousands of years. Before the pyramids were built in Egypt, we were here as tribal people. One of the things that we've always been blessed with as tribes in this area is living in a beautiful spot of God's creation. So beautiful that there was a lot of interest in moving into this area. And so we had an influx of non-tribal people into our setting that was much stronger than what most tribes experienced. As a result of that pressure from outside, we were losing a lot. We were losing a lot of our land. We were losing a lot of our culture. I'm Greg Dumontier. I'm an enrolled tribal member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes of the Flathead Reservation, a long name, but that's where we are. So from the very early connections with Lewis and Clark to Manifest Destiny and trains coming through, it wasn't a cultural interface. It wasn't about on political ideology. It was about economy. If we are going to survive as tribal people, then we need to deal with the forces, if you will, on their own terms, and in this particular case, their economic terms. I began working with the tribes in 1976. And while we grew significantly as a tribal government, we weren't growing economically as a tribe. I realized if we can build from the inside out economically, then we can, within that safety zone that we create economically, continue and to perpetuate who we are from a cultural standpoint. So in the 1990s, I decided that I wanted to do two things. One is create a business that would add resources, provide dividends, if you will, back to the tribes. And just as important, I wanted to provide a business that was going to make use of nothing more than what was between the ears of tribal people. So I formed SNK Technologies that started in information technology and very quickly moved into aerospace and ended up going not just outside our reservation boundaries, but outside the boundaries of the United States. Ended up doing hundreds of millions a year in sales, and then retired from that to create a nonprofit organization so that I could take part of my business background and apply it to an economic development project here on a reservation. So again, with all of the land that we have here, the water that's here, and having tribal people striving to build a future while protecting the things that make this place precious to us, not doing something in the agricultural area just doesn't make any sense.
There we go. Come on. Come on, farmers.
Come on, farmers.
Yeah. Rawhide. Yeah. Woo. That was fun. Raise your hand if you love arugula.
I'm Fred Billings, and I own a landscape design install business. I literally, when I was 17 years old, told God that I wanted to be part of his redemptive plan for the world's food supply, whatever that meant. So I did the most obvious thing a young man and with that desire could do in Texas, which was to go to Texas A&M University and major in agricultural economics with an emphasis on international trade.
You gotta tie it off. All right, now pull that all the way to the outside.
I spent many years studying organic growing practices. The challenge was to develop production systems that would be commercially competitive with conventional farming practices. And my heart really gravitated towards the fact that when you look at agriculture from an economics standpoint, and you look at chemical agriculture, which is by and large based on depletive practices, you deplete the nutrient base in the soil. Organic practices are regenerative. You're constantly building the soil and the nutrient base in the soil. Well, as an economist, that's really a no-brainer, right? Which one wins? It's always going to be the regenerative one. For almost 10 years, I was operating the largest certified organic produce farm in Texas. I began teaching my organic gardening and leadership development course, sharing what I was learning about growing food in a way that honors God's design. Fast forward 30 years. My brother and one of our dear friends were talking to Greg DeMontier, who founded a nonprofit in Montana to support the economic development on the tribal land.
20-some years ago, SNK Technologies established a people network, and so tapped into that network, and through the Texas portion of that network came the Texas Fred.
And so I got the phone call and flew up there to see if there was anything that I could do.
The Salish Kootenai people, in the Salish language, Scalihu means people connected to the land, people of the land. I'm Joel Claremont. I'm a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, and my family originated in the Bitterroot Valley and was moved up here when the reservation was opened. To really be a part of the community here, you have to live here. We have a lot of financial pressure coming to the reservation.
I know people that sold their places and then they cannot afford to buy another one here. I'm Virgil Dupuy. I'm the extension director at Salish Kootenai College in Pablo, Montana. I'm a tribal member. We're being out competed for even living in our own area right now.
As anyone who's tried to buy a home over the past couple of years can tell you, it's been a very challenging time in Montana's housing market.
We've seen a collision of fast-growing demand and low inventory, accelerated by population growth.
We're getting a lot of migration into our area. How we adjust to that and how we maintain our tribal cultures is going to be extremely important. And we have to draw on that 10,000 years of existence here. These three tribes were hunters and gatherers. They weren't agricultural. So in the mid-1850s, when they signed the treaty and they realized that they had to remain in this area more, they started adopting agricultural practices. So there was a complete change in lifestyle. And also they had some pretty rough handling by the U.S. government. Their horse herds were confiscated and sold, and they were forced to sell animals because they had to take them off the ranges.
So the earlier efforts here in this area to assimilate tribal people, to make us more like non-tribal people, were in agricultural areas. They wanted us to be farmers. And so the initial reaction or the initial exposure to agriculture was, we're going to take your culture and we're going to turn you into a farmer. So a great deal of resistance coming out of the gates with that. But if we're going to be able to move forward and build a future for ourselves as tribal people and for our children and grandchildren, we need to work with the things that the Creator's given us here. We have land, we have water, we have people, but people are not connected to the land and the water in an agricultural sense. And so we're recognizing that there is a missing part of this equation to bring these things together. And given the sensitivities here, our experience with agriculture, having somebody come in from the outside is difficult enough. The initial reaction was, whoa, arms folded. But Fred's demeanor and approach very quickly disarmed that pushing away, and very quickly led to, kind of relaxing a little bit, to starting to lean forward, to, wow, what is, and starting to pull. The relationship didn't happen overnight. It took over a year before we even decided, okay, let's actually do something here. And so I brought him in and said, we need to connect our people to the land, to the water, through agricultural practices here. Our historical experience with agriculture was one where we were beat over the head with it. We need to reverse that.
When I think about investing, I don't embrace the perspective that investing is only about taking some financial resource that I have, putting into some financial endeavor, and getting a financial return. That is only one form of investment. There's a synergy associated with investing different forms of capital. If I'm investing my relational capital and my spiritual capital and financial capital and my intellectual capital, and I pull them together, then some amazing things happen. So one of those amazing things has been beginning to help the Salish and Kootenai people in Montana develop an agricultural economic plan for 120,000 irrigated acres of farmland in a microclimate. We first gathered together a group of people to talk about the possibility of doing carrots. This is a productive valley. There's 120,000 irrigated acres. The lion's share of those irrigated acres, if you drive around, are producing hay or grass.
That is because our involvement agriculturally right now is about 95 to 97% cattle.
Typically, it is very non-diverse. You calve out in the wintertime, you hay in the summer, you feed through the winter, and then you sell those calves in the fall and they're gone.
Just to put it in perspective, a typical cow-calf operation might generate gross revenue per acre of somewhere between $100 and $200. A really good one might be $250. The national average for carrot production, $10,500 an acre.
It's not just about money. We understand that we can't move forward with this if it doesn't make sense economically. But we're not approaching it from the standpoint of how much money can we make from this. It's about sustainability. It's about perpetuation. We have always been in step with what nature or God provides. And even though we have stepped away from agricultural practices in recent generations, we need to step back towards that in a very sustainable fashion to continue what we've always done for thousands of years.
When you look at a nutrient base in the soil that has the capacity to improve over time and improve itself, improve its structure and its productivity over time, from an economic standpoint, that is vastly superior to an economic model that says we're going to deplete the soil, we're going to deplete the resources that are in it, and we're going to only replace what was alive with inert chemistry. That's the direction that agriculture has gone over the last 50 to 70 years. And now the pendulum is beginning to swing back the other direction, and people are looking at it and going, maybe there's a better way. When you're trying to make the soil healthy, carrots are a great first crop because they're not highly demanding on the soil. And they also go down and they break up and loosen the ground deeply without having to invert the soil. Because the thing you do not want to do in regenerative agriculture is invert the soil. In other words, deep plow like we do all over the country. Because that takes the anaerobic living organisms and flips them up and puts them in an oxygen-rich environment that they don't like. And it takes all the oxygen-breathing organisms that are in the top part of the soil and buries them and suffocates them. And so what we want to do is we actually want to keep those microbes in their environment and begin to feed them and build the living organisms that are in the soil. Carrots are unique in that they take 14 to 21 days to germinate. So seed in the ground and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait a little more, and then all of a sudden, boop, 2 leaves. There's one there. Praise the Lord. That's great. It ain't a crop, but there's some.
I did. I'm happy. Not a lot, but they're coming.
This collaborative effort with a few local producers who were willing to provide a certain amount of land to see if we can produce some carrots. And so where we are right now with our carrot crop is about this tall.
The return on the investment is first sustainability.
We're hoping to produce a crop that is sustainable and also brings enough money so that we can all live and prosper here.
We can rebuild this area, this agricultural community together. I'm very hopeful that can happen, and I believe it can happen.
Every day, we're all investing in something, whether it's intellectual capital or spiritual capital or financial capital. It doesn't matter. If I get out of bed in the morning, my investment has started. The question is, what do I want to produce? What do I want my life to produce?
As we start to engage in that economic benefit, when we start to realize the benefits socially as well as from a nutritional standpoint, we can establish a connection that is going to be very healing and is going to allow us to be able to move forward to that point where we have generations that understand that historical trauma was a part of what their ancestors went through, but it's not something that they're dealing with on a daily basis like our current generations are. That's a far reach from growing something out of the ground to healing in a spiritual and an emotional sense. But all of those things are connected. All those things are intertwined. And I believe that we can get there.
What we're seeing being played out in this story is of course not just in Montana and Texas. It's a story of two diverse cultures coming together with a willingness to help and to be helped. We see this in different places and communities all around the world. Our good friend, Craig Deal, is a leader at Foundations for Farming.
Foundations for Farming has taken these practices and instilled them in Zimbabwe
and other countries in Africa to create sustainable jobs and work. The idea we're getting at is this is a global application. Job creation is also not limited to agriculture. Instead, this story is transcendent, and we hope it gives you an idea of the power that can be unlocked through God's plan rather than our own. On the Faith Driven Investor website, you can find a list of some fund managers that focus on creating jobs for the least of these, some that are geared towards creating jobs in these emerging markets. Funds that invest in underprivileged or disadvantaged segments of society are often in funds where minimum investments, liquidity, and hold times vary. So you want to be sure to consult your advisor as to what investments make the most sense for you. Another opportunity is to connect and partner with like-minded, faith-driven investors who share a passion to solve one of these injustices, sharpening each other through content, conversation, and diving into a community of like-minded investors that might deploy capital to solve these problems. If you're not currently connected to a group of peers and fellow believers, go to faithdriveninvestor.org to find one that fits your needs and schedule. See you next time.
Faith Driven Investor is a discipleship ministry from Faith Driven Movements, a non-profit corporation whose mission is to inspire and mobilize people to use their time, talent, and resources to impact the world around them. The materials are for informational purposes only. All investing carries risk, so be sure to consult an advisor before making any investment decisions. Hosts and guests may maintain positions in the companies and securities discussed. For all other questions, please visit faithdriveninvestor.org.